Wait, that technique...
Yasuo is League of Legends' most infamous champion for a couple of reasons. On average, he dies a lot, the most of any champion, and just when you need him the most on your team, it seems, he's usually farming a side lane. He's pretty tough to master as well, so people just have a hard time getting a grip of Yasuo. That being said, Yasuo is definitely an exciting champion, and that makes for an interesting question for today's video. If Yasuo is tough to play at first and hard to master towards perfection, what exactly makes or breaks him as a champion in-game? When played closer and closer towards perfection, what do the best of the best Yasuo players do? Today, let's investigate what the differences look like between the average Yasuo player and the one who's usually on your team versus the average high elo ones. What makes them different from one another? The data that we gathered about Yasuo comes straight from the Gamer Performance Index, or GPI. The GPI calculates performance based on 8 skills, which are fighting, farming, vision, aggression, survivability, objectives, consistency, and versatility. These skills have intricate metrics that break down performance based on role and champion. For example, if a player has high enough games on Yasuo for mid lane, you can see these metrics for specifically Yasuo in the mid lane. What we've done is gather data from 30 Yasuo GPIs across several regions. Each of the 3 regions, NA, EU West, and Korea, will have 10 accounts taken from those regions. 5 low to mid ELO Yasuos, which I have set the range from Silver 4 to Platinum 4. I decided not to gather Bronze or Iron gameplay due to it being so far away from Gold or Platinum that I felt like it would skew the results too far heavily towards those lower tiers. We will also gather data from 5 Diamond 2 or higher Yasuos from each region, and these will represent our sample of our high elo accounts. To start off, let's talk about low elo Yasuo GPI numbers. One thing that may jump out to you instantly is that Yasuo players have a very high consistency score. Across the 3 regions, the average was 93.5. This is because more or less Yasuo's performance can either be consistently good or consistently bad. A consistently bad Yasuo player is by definition, well, consistent. The next highest score was objectives, and to me, this one is a surprise. Yasuo will more often than not be splitting and side laning, even in lower ranks, and what is cool to see is how often they prioritize things like dragons, towers, or baron. The difference between the aggression scores of the 3 regions is something I'd like to highlight and point out, as the Europe West Yasuos were by far the most aggressive and played the riskiest and the most forward of the 3 regions. Lastly, let's talk about fighting. There is a pretty interesting reason why Yasuos have low fighting scores, and that's because of how often they take and lose duels and skirmishes. In the fighting score, we can calculate their pick score, their skirmish score, their teamfight score, and their duel score. For this set of Yasuo players, their numbers are quite telling. Across all 3 regions, the players were a part of 3 to 4 skirmishes per game, and their win rate in those skirmishes is around 30 or 40%, averaging out to 37%. And while the EU West Yasuo players did have a 57.8% winning percentage in duels, the NA ones had a much worse percentage at 45.2%. All of this starts to make sense with the champion, so it will be really interesting to look at the high elo ones and see if these numbers change, whether going up or going down. Moving on to the high elo Yasuos, let's see how they compare and stack up. The thing that I instantly noticed is just how much better the farming score is for these sets of players, all 3 regions having their players farming in the high 90s. From any high elo coach, you will have them tell you the best way to get better at League of Legends will always be farm more and die less, which is exactly the case here. The lower elo Yasuos are totally on par when it comes to late game farming and CSing, but are pretty far outclassed in early and mid game. On average, the Diamond 2+ ones are farming 1.5 CS per minute more in both early and mid game, which also equates to an overall average of 1.5 CS per minute more. Survivability is the score that shows metrics based on deaths, and the higher the score, the better, meaning less deaths overall. The high elo ones have an average survivability score of 53.6, when the low elo ones average was 21.4. It is understandable that high elo players will have higher numbers. It would seem weird otherwise, but what is important to note is how they do it. First off, how these Yasuo players die less and farm more can be directly correlated to their vision score. Notice that no matter what you say and do, vision and wards are important. These Yasuos had a much higher vision score on average, which leads to less deaths and more time on the map to farm. The other thing is lane matchups and understanding them properly. A lot of high elo players may tell you to stick to one champion over and over again, and they do this for a good reason. No matter how broken you think certain champions are and how impossible they feel to play against, eventually playing the same matchup 10 or more times, you will improve in this area for sure. This is also why some high rated players may recommend you to do things like get a buddy in a custom and go practice some matchups. That way you can be more comfortable playing into certain lanes.
But back then, I'd just get into a game like before a scrim set or something and just do like CS practice or get a mate and just practice a matchup over and over. If you have friends, you can just, if you're struggling with a matchup, just say, hey man, can we play this matchup like 10 times? Just to learn like the first 6 levels of the lane.
Champion mechanics can definitely take you a long way, and knowing the ins and outs of Yasuo is tricky for sure. If you watch some Korean Challenger Yasuo montages, you can easily be blown away at their skills, but remember that mechanics are just the part of the game that people see. It's just the highlight. Consider the fact that before a Yasuo makes a sick outplay, how is he able to even be in that position? Is there a reason he won a 1v2 not just because he's good, but also because he's extremely farmed? Is the reason that a Yasuo got a solo kill on his laner not just because he made a sick flash outplay, but also because he set up the minion wave first? Is the reason that he's able to not die so often to jungle ganks because he tracks the jungler and buys wards? These are all things to consider, and the data certainly suggests this is the case, at least for the most part. Having high aggression scores while also having high vision scores allows you to play aggressive in lane, but then not always be risking a death to every single jungle gank. Anyway, thank you for watching our breakdown video on Yasuo. Let us know which champion you want to see broken down next in the comments down below, and good luck on the Rift in Season 9. Go get 'em.